So today we're going to do lab 3 and 4 for the graphing calculators. So lab 3 is graphing linear equations, and lab 5 is finding the intersection of two equations. So first thing that we have to do is actually go back in and to the online graphing calculator that we have. So when you first go into Google Classroom, you have to go into classwork and then into link for online graphing calculator and sign in for TestNav. Remember, you're not actually going to sign in. You just go to practice tests and then mathematics and geometry, then computer-based practice test unit 3. And the name doesn't really matter, and you hit start. And then up at the top, you have your graphing calculator. Now the nice thing about this graphing calculator is that if I drag it all the way over to the left, I can shrink down my screen. And so I'm going to split my screens and just slide this over to the left. So now we have our graphing calculator. So first thing we're going to do is lab 3, graphing linear equations in y equals mx plus b. So the important thing about this is that it has to be in slope-intercept form to do any graphing. All right. So remember, it has to be in slope-intercept form. Other than that, once I'm done writing that. All right. So start with lab 3. Like I said, we're going to graph the equation y equals 2x plus 7. So in order to do that on the graphing calculator, first thing we have to do is hit the y equals button. That's this top left button right here on the graphing calculator. Hit y equals, and it brings up a bunch of different options. So that's y1, y2, and so forth. They're all color-coded on this app. Not all calculators have that. Now to actually input the graph or the equation, you're not going to have to hit y, it's already there, so you just enter the equation. So that would be pressing the 2 button, and then the variable button, which is x, t, theta, and n, then plus, and 7. So once you input this, you have your equation. Right? So we want to make sure that the window is set properly. So then you hit the window button. Now when you go into the window button on the app here, automatically it's set to -10, 10, and 1. -10, 10, and 1. This really is called standard. So it's standard because it's just the normal setting that you'd use. The x min and max value is the domain, so it sets the x-axis to a minimum of -10 and a maximum of 10. And the SCL is the scale, so this has a scale of 1. Your y min is -10, y max is 10, so that sets the y-axis from -10 to 10 and has a scale of 1. Then we can hit graph in order to actually view our equation. And so here's what we have. It's important to know what your scale is because as you can see, there's no numbers here. So you have to know if it's what the scale is going to be. Now, from here, we are able to trace the line. So tracing the line is helpful. So all you have to do is hit trace, and then you can hit the left or right button. So if I hit left, it'll just take me on down. Now, if you notice, we've got a lot of repeating decimals, but we don't have any exact values. So the trace button is useful because we can just keep on going, but it doesn't show us exactly what any of the points are. So really, we want to be able to find the table. in order to identify points in a table. So to do that, we hit second and then graph. And here we see that we've got a table. We can actually scroll up and down the table. And we can find some different points, X and Y1. Notice all these extra columns after Y1. When we do intersection of line, we'll actually be able to see what this looks like when we've got another equation. So then once we've got our coordinates, we just want to identify 3 coordinates. So here we would have, we could put -1, 5 and 0, 7 and 1, 9. Right. And I just did the 3 in the middle. And that's how you graph a linear equation. You can graph any equation, but just to start, that's a linear equation. So now we want to go back to the home screen. So remember, to get out of the menu or any of these apps, you can always go back to the home screen by hitting second and quit. So we just hit second and quit. So now that we're back at the home screen, we'll do lab 5, which is the intersection of 2 equations. So in this case, we're actually going to have to put in 2 different equations. So we hit y equals, and from there you can clear, so you can start fresh. And so y1 is going to be 2, and then the variable button plus 7, and scroll down so we can do a second equation. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either do -3 divided by 2, then the variable button plus 3, or you can go ahead and clear that and you can use the fraction bar. So you would do negative, and then to do the fraction is alpha, y equals, enter. So now we can have a fraction of 3, and you can click the over button, 2, and then over, and the variable button plus 3. Now, you'll only be able to do it like this on certain calculators. Some calculators, even if you use the y equals or alpha y equals enter to get to the fraction bar, it'll make it still look like a slash instead. So now that we have our equation, we can go back into our window, make sure that it's still set at -10, 10, 1, -10, 10, 1. And now we'll hit graph so we can see our actual our lines. So we've got our blue line and our red line. So I know that my red line is y2. And we know that the blue line is y1. So now we want to find the actual intersection. So if we use trace, again, we can go along and go almost to where we think it's intersecting. So here we get -1.06. So write that out as -1.06, 1, 4.879. Now, in order to find the exact value, it's a little bit longer. So we'll hit second, and then calc, which is trace. So I'm going to actually change that. So trace, and then 5. Now it gives us, or asks us for the first curve. What it means is the line, first line. So Y1 is the first line. So you can hit enter. And then it's saying the second curve, and it's in red because it's talking about the Y2 line. We can hit enter. And now it's saying to guess. What it wants us to do is kind of guess where that intersection is. And that's pretty close to what we had estimated before. So we'll just hit enter. And now it's giving us these decimals again. So now I'll write it in red, like it has it. So the estimation, or the what it's saying is the exact is negative 1.143 and 4.714. So see, this is that part where it's saying it's listed as decimals at the bottom. Okay. Now, in order to create these as fractions, we have to hit second and then quit or mode. And from there, we want to hit the variable button. And that way it gives us the X, math, and see how it's already on fractions. So we hit enter. And it gives us that. And we can hit enter. And it tells us that it's negative 8/7. So we know that this is negative 8/7, comma. Now to get the Y value, we need to do the Y variable. But the problem is that we can't use the variable button again. So we have to hit alpha. We go down here to the number 1. And then we can come back up to math and hit 1 and hit enter. And we have the Y value is 33/7. And that's how we find the exact values. So the only thing that I would say is that it says Y, but we call it 1 because it's easier to identify the actual button. So you're not scrolling around or wasting time looking for the little blue writing or the little green writing. So when you want to get back to the home screen, you can do second and mode. And just that's helpful for it. So, one thing that I would say is really with these calculators, you can play around with them quite a bit. You're not going to hurt the calculator, especially this one online. So I would actually suggest playing around with it a little bit. That way you can get more comfortable with it, more familiar. The only thing that is not on here that I was going to show you is how to, if we go back to the table, we can now see how we have the Y1 and Y2. So there's just times when you've got, you can scroll along here and see where the Y value is or the Y2 value is, and we can go from, looks like -1 or -2 to 1, and we can see that it starts off that Y1 is smaller, and then once we go to 1, we see that Y1 is larger. So we can't really see the intersection from a table, so that's where the graph is really helpful, and also being able to find the exact values from a point. So at this point, this is really the end of the video. So hopefully you guys can play with it a little bit more, but this is just graphing linear equations and finding the intersection of two equations. So you want to make sure that you complete Concept Check Lab 3 and 5 in Google Classroom, and then make sure to do homework lab 3 and 5 in Google Classroom as well. The homework is only 6 problems, 2 graphing, and then 4 intersections. So, all right, remember, if you have any questions, pop back into the Google Meet and be more than happy to answer them. Have a good day.